I want to thank you all for including me in this very special event tonight. And I want to begin by thanking our host, Ronald Lauder. While there are many things I admire about Ronald, there's one thing I admire most of all. Many Jews who have risen to the top of the social totem pole are great philanthropists and great humanitarians. They build hospitals and they endow universities. They do wonderful things for their fellow man. But all too often, they do little, if anything, for their own people. Not Ronald Lauder. He has shown that one can be both a man of the world and a man of his people. Ronald has endowed universities and art museums, advanced medical research and environmental conservation, and contributed to so many other universal causes in so many ways. But at the same time, Ronald Lauder has also dedicated himself to advancing the causes of his people. For nearly a quarter of a century, he has led major Jewish organizations. First the Jewish National Fund and now the World Jewish Congress. By the way, Ronald, even Moses could only handle 40 years before he had to call it quits. For decades, Ronald has been at the forefront of the fight against anti-Semitism, most recently in calling out Jeremy Corbyn's anti-Semitism. And most impressively, Ronald has done perhaps more than any single person to rebuild Jewish life in Central and Eastern Europe. So, Ronald, on behalf of a grateful Jewish state, I thank you for all you have done for the Jewish people. I also want to congratulate the Rothschild family for winning the Herzl Award. Now, some of you may think that presenting the Herzl Award to Lord Rothschild is about as unexceptional as presenting the Lombardi Trophy to Bob Kraft. But as you heard this evening, this award is not simply a recognition of the prodigious contribution the Rothschild has made to the Jewish state for over a century. That contribution includes the vital role his great-uncle played in securing the Balfour Declaration, and the generosity his family has shown in literally building, as you saw, some of the most important institutions of the State of Israel, like our Knesset and Supreme Court. This award is also a recognition, I think, of what Lord Rothschild himself has done to build on that incredible legacy. From his quarter-century-long leadership of Yad HaNadiv to the extraordinary effort he has made to help the State of Israel build a national library worthy of the people of the book. So, Lord Rothschild, on behalf of the Jewish state, thank you for everything you have done to turn a remarkable family legacy into an even more remarkable one. Before I introduce Bob Kraft, I do want to say a few words about the attack in Pittsburgh. I have not had an opportunity yet to speak in an appropriate public forum since that horrific attack, and it seems to me that the World Jewish Congress is a particularly appropriate forum. Ladies and gentlemen, I would love to believe that anti-Semitism began a couple of years ago, but that is simply not true. Anti-Semitism is not only a millennial-old problem, it has been rising around the world for the past couple of decades. Over that time, there have been deadly attacks on Jewish communities in Mumbai, Toulouse, Paris, Brussels, Copenhagen, and in so many other places. America has also not been immune. 6 were shot and 1 was killed in an attack on a Jewish federation in Seattle in 2006. 1 person was killed in an attack on the National Holocaust Memorial Museum in Washington in 2009. And in 2014, 3 people were killed outside a Jewish community center in Kansas City. Then came Pittsburgh, the worst anti-Semitic attack in U.S. history, claiming 11 innocent Jewish lives. Unfortunately, in a world in which every single thing is immediately politicized, this too was immediately politicized. But the struggle against anti-Semitism must not be politicized. It must bring together people of goodwill on all sides who will stand together in common cause against those who hate Jews. And it must especially bring Jews together. For if we do not stand together to confront our enemies, no one will confront them for us. Last April, I visited the Warsaw Ghetto with my wife on a March of the Living trip. What is perhaps most remarkable about what happened in the ghetto is that the different Jewish groups there could not even stand together to fight against the Nazis. We must learn from history. To those of you who are convinced about what is driving anti-Semitism in America today, consider this. The last year for which FBI statistics exist about anti-Semitic incidents in America is 2016. The FBI puts out the statistics in November of the following year, so we should see the statistics from 2017 in the next couple of weeks. Well, in 2016, according to FBI statistics, there were 684 hate crimes against Jews in America. That's over half of all the hate crimes against religious groups. Many people feel that the heated rhetoric during the campaign that year had contributed greatly to the rise of anti-Semitism. Perhaps it did. But here is something you probably don't know. In 2008, those same FBI statistics show that there were over 1,000 anti-Semitic incidents in America. In the year 2000, there were over 1,100. I say this only because if we are to fight anti-Semitism, we must put away the politics and stand together. We must expose anti-Semitism wherever we find it. And we must call on people to spit out those who hate Jews, not only from the other side of the aisle, but from their side of the aisle. And one more thing. After Charlottesville, President Trump did not say the right thing. After Pittsburgh, he did. He condemned anti-Semitism in the strongest possible terms. He said something that I have never heard a non-Jewish leader say. He said that those who try to destroy the Jews, we will destroy them. And after saying the right thing, President Trump did the right thing by going to Pittsburgh and paying his respects to those who were murdered for being Jews. I wish that others would have joined me in greeting him there, because frankly, nothing would have sent a stronger message to the Jew haters than to see people putting politics aside and standing together with the President of the United States in opposing them and the evil they represent. Ladies and gentlemen, part of the problem is that we had a half a century after the Holocaust where it was politically incorrect to attack Jews. And for the last couple of decades, it's become fashionable again to attack Jews. Much of that anti-Semitism is masked behind hatred towards Israel. Once they singled out the Jewish people for special treatment, now they single out the Jewish state for special treatment. And many believed that the period after the Holocaust was the new norm. But it was the aberration. And in fact, the Holocaust has distorted the Jewish people's view of our own history. It has certainly distorted the non-Jewish world's view of Jewish history. It is such a seismic event that happened. 1/3 of our people were murdered. 6 million Jews. To put 1/3 in your imagination, to understand what that means, that would be the equivalent of over 100 million Americans. And if you have a tough time wrapping your mind around that, imagine a 9/11 every day for a century. That's what the Holocaust did to the Jewish people. It is such a seismic event. It is like a blinding sun that blocks out all the anti-Semitic stars. But if we take the Holocaust out of the equation, what we have is century after century after century of attacks, of massacres, of pogroms, of expulsions against Jews. You gave earlier a Herzl Award. Well, Herzl had the idea to found a Jewish state a half century before the Holocaust, precisely because he understood that living in a liberal democratic world was not enough. He went and saw what happened at the Dreyfus Affair, and he understood that the Jews were endangered even in enlightened France. And in fact, Herzl believed that the reason why there was anti-Semitism was because the Jews did not have a state. He said, we're a minority everywhere, a majority nowhere. If there would be one place where we would be a majority, we would be treated like a normal people. What's ironic is how a century after Herzl, everything has come full circle. Then the early Zionists believed that the reason why there was anti-Semitism is that the Jews did not have a state. Now many people believe the reason why there is anti-Semitism is that the Jews do have a state. Then they said Jews go to Palestine. Now they say Jews get out of Palestine. Israel is not the cause or the cure for anti-Semitism. It didn't end hatred towards the Jews, but it did give us one thing. It gave us the ability to fight back. That's what Israel gave the Jewish people. And today, as Ronald said, it's not 1938. Not only do we have an Israel that can protect us on a battlefield, that can stand up for the Jewish people in Congress or at the United Nations, but we have people like you, we have organizations like this that can also bring the fight to our enemies, and we must never shy away from that fight. Now let me turn to the person who I came here to introduce, the winner of this year's Teddy Kollek Award, Robert Kraft. Most of you don't know this, but the real reason Bob Kraft agreed to come here tonight is that for over a decade, he has been dying to win a prestigious award surrounded by Giants fans. I know that's a low blow, Bob, but considering all the miserable fall Sundays you've caused Dolphin fans like me to endure, I figure you'd understand. Besides, the first time I met Bob Kraft was actually through football. You see, I used to play in Israel's National Football League. That is where I discovered that the fastest way to become a great Jewish athlete, play with Jews. Well, it was a Kraft Stadium in Jerusalem where I met Bob Kraft when he brought Tom Brady to Israel. Unfortunately, I did not have a senior position in the Israeli government back then because I might have been able to detain Brady in Israel indefinitely. Seriously, what struck me about Bob at the time was how humble and unassuming a person he was. Here was a Super Bowl winning owner without any airs about him, treating everyone with dignity and respect. My first impression of him was simply that he was a real mensch. Over the years, as I got to know Bob, I realized that he wasn't a mensch at all. He was actually a mega mensch. I got to know that mega mensch when I accompanied him on a trip bringing a group of NFL Hall of Famers to Israel. I saw how Bob interacted with the players, how he rode the bus with everyone else, and how decent he was to everyone who crossed his path. I saw how in no small measure that it was because of that decency that he helped turn those modern-day gladiators into ambassadors of goodwill for Israel across America. And so many others have seen that mega mensch. Those lucky people standing behind him in line at the Dunkin' Donuts see it when he pays for everyone's coffee just so he can do a random act of kindness to start his day. Americans saw it a few years ago in a nationally televised Patriots game when Bob decided to have a moment of silence for Ezra Schwartz, an 18-year-old fan who was murdered by a Palestinian terrorist while studying abroad in Israel. And all of you can see it if you take a few minutes to watch an incredible commencement speech Bob gave at Yeshiva University a couple of years ago. There you will see so much more than a man who is the most successful sports owner of our time. You will see the proud son of Harry and Sarah Kraft, who has lived his life by the Jewish values his parents hoped to instill in him, of doing justice, of loving goodness, and walking humbly with God. Ladies and gentlemen, this year, in honor of Israel's 70th year of independence, our embassy recognized 70 Americans who have made a uniquely valuable contribution to strengthening Israel and our alliance with the United States of America. Bob and his late wife, Myra, are among those honorees. "20 years ago, as Israel celebrated its 50th anniversary, Bob was one of 50 people across the world who was honored for the unique contribution he made to Jerusalem. So I know how much Bob Kraft deserves an award that recognizes him for the outstanding contribution he has made to the Jewish people. But frankly, ladies and gentlemen, this is not the reason why I wanted to be here tonight. I came here tonight not because of all the great things Bob Kraft has done, but because of the great person Bob Kraft is. I came here to honor the Jewish people's mega mensch. I came here to thank him not only for all he has done for our people, but for doing it in a way that makes all our people proud. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming the winner of this year's Teddy Kollek Award, Bob Kraft.